everybody. Welcome in to the Just Sayin Podcast. Jake's joining me. I'm Sutton. This is episode number 10. Hit double digits, Jake.
Yes, sir.
Had a crazy week 3. Yet another bad week for me. Pillows were thrown. Couch cushions were thrown outside the house. Jake couldn't do that because he was inside the Sanford Stadium. He was between the hedges this Saturday. Well, I guess he was outside the hedges. You're not really between them. But he was there to watch South Carolina, Georgia. I went back home to watch Alabama struggle against the South Florida Bulls. But besides that, we'll review all 5 games that we previewed in episode 9. We'll look back at our best bets, which were not, again, another bad week for us. Had a good week too, but the other 3 have been bad. So maybe that was just an outlier.
Look, we're changing the name to bets. We're not saying best bets anymore. We're saying
all right.
bets.
So we're looking at our bets from week 3. I'm going to go ahead and cross out the best out of my show sheet. We're also going to give you guys our new top 25s updated going into week 4. And then week 3 helmet stickers back again for another rendition of that series. But, Jake, I think we should just go ahead and take the elephant out of the room. Actually take the elephant out of the room. Alabama beating USF on the road 17-3. Wow, that even makes it worse saying USF.
I was about to say, if that was UCF, that would have been more impressive.
But yeah, a 14-point win for the Crimson Tide. Where do I start? I mean, when I heard Tyler Buchner got the start, I told everybody here on episode 9 that I did not agree with that. I thought Jalen Milroe should be getting the start. And it was clear and obvious that Tyler Buchner should be nowhere near even the top 3 on Alabama's quarterback depth chart. He went 5 for 14 for 34 yards. Now, I will say he threw one really good pass to Jermaine Burton in the end zone that Burton probably should have caught. Instead of diving for it or sliding for it or something, Burton just let it go by him. That was the best throw he made, was an incompletion. If that puts into perspective how bad he played, he looked abysmal. And I'm not even going to say it was the weather's fault because he had the whole first quarter when it didn't rain, and then really when it was raining, he was just handing the ball off. So Buchner was abysmal. And then I just felt bad for Ty Simpson because every time I looked, he was on the ground. So he made one nice little pass over the middle to Dupree. But he wasn't special at all anywhere else. I didn't even think he commanded the offense well. It was just the protection was so bad on the offensive line. We've been lied to this entire offseason that this offensive line was going to be one of the best ones in college football. They're looking like one of the worst ones. Now I will say they can run block. Roydell Williams had a great game. He had over 120 yards rushing. The offensive line can run block, but my Lord, Caden Proctor is getting blown up every time we step back to throw a ball at left tackle. And I know he's a freshman, but we have got to be able to contain these pass rushers, especially the USF pass rushers, a team that went 1-11 last year, a team that's 1-2 this year with their only win over Florida A&M, which scored a touchdown in the first half, something Alabama didn't do against USF. Very disappointed play. Now, today we got the big news that Jalen Milroe has been announced the starter for the Ole Miss game. Obviously, I think that's going to trend Alabama in the right direction. There's been a lot of reports saying that the locker room has been supporting Jalen Milroe this whole time, which I think I've kind of been talking about. I know, Jake, you probably heard me talk about how the players like Jalen Milroe playing. And it's pretty obvious that he runs the offense the best. Obviously, when he was the quarterback, week 1, we scored 56 points. And then we scored 24 against Texas, who probably has one of the best defenses in college football, arguably. So the offense is clearly ran much better with Milroe in. Yes, we're going to have to take our lumps with him playing quarterback. He's going to turn the ball over. He's not perfect. But I would much rather have those explosive touchdown plays mixed in with a turnover or 2 every game than just not throw the ball at all and not score at all. So Jalen Milroe, definitely the right guy. Very puzzling decision that Nick Saban had this weekend. There's a lot of speculation that Milroe was suspended, possibly got a concussion last week. And I don't think it's either one of those. I actually think Saban just wanted to see what he had with the other 2 guys. And they obviously don't have a lot. So it's Jalen Milroe the rest of the year for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think it's ultimately a great decision. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does against Ole Miss. Hopefully his confidence isn't completely shot after being benched for literally nothing. So what are your thoughts on all this bull crap that's going on with the Crimson Tide?
I mean, I'm not going to say anything too bad. I think a lot of, obviously the whole media, the whole public fell for the trap that it was Nick Saban, that he was going to bring him back. There were obvious holes on this team that people just overlooked. People picked them to win the Natty, and they can still win the Natty. Whole season is still in front of them, but they have not looked like the team that people thought they were going to be, including me. I mean, did I think they were a top 4 team? No, but I did. I told myself that it was Nick Saban, that he was going to get through it because he's the GOAT, and he is. He still is. This Bama team, I don't know. The defense played pretty well on
Defense
Saturday.
outstanding. The defense was outstanding.
But
It's
again,
USF, yes.
Yeah, but again, it is USF. It was raining, which helps the defense. Partly why Alabama's offense played so poor. But USF could have put up more than 3 points. I mean, apparently, I didn't know this. They didn't have a kicker that could kick it like 35 yards. And it was, like I said, it was pouring. But I mean, this game could have been 17-9 if they had a kicker. But I mean, like you said, my concern is that O-line. Y'all came into the season playing. Y'all were saying y'all were going to play murder ball. Y'all have been getting murdered on that side of the ball. Like you said, Caden Proctor. Not taking too. I mean, I'm taking stock into it. Don't get me wrong. He has played horrifically, but he is a freshman, so I do think he has the talent to be a first rounder. This season he might still continue to play poorly and he might get benched. That doesn't change his direction for the future. But yeah, I mean, just obviously horrible showing from the Tide. But you did escape with a win, which is ultimately all that matters for your season.
Yeah. And I've been critical of Nick Saban in past shows, and I'm not changing my tone. This is his fault. That decision should have never been made to go to Tyler Buchner because he practiced the best in the middle of the week. He was absolutely abysmal. He should have never even been on this roster. The fact that he was on this roster is an absolute disgrace. I mean, the fact that he was even given the reins on Saturday, even over Ty Simpson. I mean, it was obvious Ty Simpson was much better than him even when he went in. Alabama combined 10 for 20. I think it was like 10 for 23 passing or 10 for 24 passing.
10 for 20.
Buchner had a 16 QBR and Simpson had a 21. I mean, I have no idea what was going through Saban's mind to make that decision.
Let me give my opinion on it. Milroe was either hurt or suspended. Saban did not just not play him, because if you can recall 2018, 2019, I don't know when the year was, when y'all opened up with Duke and you had Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, maybe other team.
Najee and Brian Robinson that were suspended
the whole game.
No, first half.
No, they were suspended the whole game. And then y'all were struggling.
It was the first half and they put him in the second quarter. That's what happened. Go ahead.
Anyway, y'all were struggling against Duke. Put them in whenever they were not. It wasn't how long they were supposed to be out for. So that's why this was a game in the fourth. It was 10-3 going into the fourth quarter. Saban did not just let Milroe sit on the sideline when he knows, because he knew that Milroe gave him the best chance to win. He knew that. You knew that. I knew that. So he did not just want to see how it could play out, because if he gives you the best chance to win, you're not just going to flip a coin and see what happens with USF potentially tanking your season. I mean, because obviously if you lose this game, no shot for a natty. I mean, y'all can still win that. Yeah, y'all can still win that season.
One more game in general, it's no shot for a natty.
And that's what I'm saying. There is no reason that Nick Saban would have left him on the sideline without either injury or suspension.
Well, and here's another thing. In his press conference today, he cited the reason why Milroe has won is not only his play, but his leadership. And
I will say,
he's a great leader, but we already knew this. And I don't know what changed in between week 2 and now week 4. There's this week. What was the difference? What does it matter?
There's definitely something going on there, but I mean, I will say you can be a leader and still get suspended. Like Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint got a speeding ticket in the offseason, but he's the leader. Him and Ladd McConkey are the leaders of that wide receiver room. And so MRJ was suspended for our first game, but he's still the leader in that wide receiver room. So, I mean, like I said, you can have a leader get suspended.
Yes, it's not out of the question, but I just find all of this to be very odd. It's not like Nick Saban at all, and definitely not what we've seen in previous years. So that's enough of Alabama. Obviously, taking on Ole Miss on Saturday here in Tuscaloosa. It's a 7-point spread right now. I saw it at like 11 and a half at other places. I was like, geez. But let's talk about what happened in between the hedges. Scary first half there for Georgia. But obviously, I think everyone thought they were going to bounce back in the second half, which they did. Ended up with a 24-14 victory over the Gamecocks. So go ahead and give your analysis on your Bulldogs.
Yeah, I didn't think we played horrifically. South Carolina is a good team. They have really good weapons on the outside. And their line has gotten a whole lot better since the first week. Are they good? No. Can they run the ball? No. But I mean, they're not 9 sacks bad. So they've definitely gotten a lot better since that first week. And I came into this game, I thought we were going to cover, I predicted wrong. But I think this could be a turning point for our team because, in the the first half, we were down 14-3. And, their offense had a few sustainable drives. We couldn't convert. Our field goal kicker missed 2 kicks. One was like a 28-yarder, 30-yarder. So anyway, we need to make a change at kicker. Go with the senior and Jared Zirkle. But I mean, second half came around and we looked like the best team in the nation, especially with how poorly all the elite teams played this weekend, except for Ohio State. But I mean, we outscored South Carolina 21-0 in the second half. And I mean, we did not do well on third downs. We went 5 for 13. But I mean, I didn't think it was the worst showing. We didn't have our All-American safety Javon Bullard, and so we were having to switch between Dan Jackson and David Daniel. And I'm just glad they got reps because they're not to the caliber that Javon Bullard is. But I will say my biggest concern, it wasn't specifically about the game. Amarius Mims went down in the second quarter. Our starting right tackle, who was playing at an All-American rate, and he was most likely going to be an All-American this year. He sustained an injury and is now out for probably the next 4 to 6 weeks on his ankle. He had a high ankle sprain, so he's going to have tightrope surgery. So that's my biggest concern. But I mean, he will be back for our biggest games in Tennessee and Ole Miss, so we'll see. But yeah, I'm not going to spoil one of my helmet stickers, but this Georgia defense, they played really well. Spencer Rattler went off in the first half, but looked like he was in chokehold the second half. What'd you think about it? I don't know if you were able to watch any of the highlights.
Well, I definitely saw some of the highlights, but I think one stat that jumps off the page to me, just looking here, Spencer Rattler was their leading rusher, and he only had 35 yards. Going into this game, I think both of us knew that they didn't have much of a rushing attack, and that was only going to get worse against Georgia, a team who's, that's kind of their calling card, is stopping the rush. And that obviously came to fruition. And then I think another thing that you and me talked about, have emphasized to this point of the year with Georgia is their running game. It's been kind of a question mark with all the injuries there, not having the quote unquote star per se, but Dejon Edwards looked like a star this past Saturday. So 20 carries, 118 yards and a touchdown. I mean, he's picking up that slack without having, Kendall Milton and some other guys, at 100% or even playing. And I think another good thing, now you can take whatever you want to take from Beck's performance. I don't think you were saying first round draft pick at the beginning of the year. I definitely still think he's a quality quarterback in college football. A guy, he's a little bit, another thing that I before I get onto that is how valuable was Stetson Bennett. I think it showed Carson Beck play is kind of showing you Stetson Bennett's a lot better than people thought, especially me. But Carson Beck's been pretty efficient. 27 to 35, 269, about 10 yards a pass. But I like what he's doing distributing the ball. He's getting it to a lot of different guys, a lot of different receivers are catching the ball, which is always a great thing to see as a fan of a team. Obviously, this is Georgia's first test of the season. They won't really have a test for a long time. South Carolina's not a bad team, but they're not a great team. Spencer Rattler, I think, is a lot better than what people give him credit for as well. Even though he did throw 2 picks, he doesn't have much on that South Carolina team to help him out. And I came away impressed by his performance.
I mean, I think I said on the last show that he's probably the best QB we're going to face this year. I think he's better than Jackson Dart, and I obviously think he's better than Joe Milton. But I mean, I want to touch on what you said. Dejon Edwards, he looked elite. 20 carries for 118 yards with a touchdown. And it's not like he broke one away, and that's there's no outlier. Yet his longest was for 21. So I mean, he was just pushing the pile, breaking tackles, making the first dude miss the whole time. So he looked really good. And then, like you said, Spencer Rattler, 2 interceptions. Really good plays by both Tyke Smith, especially Tyke. Oh my gosh, I don't know if you've seen it. You should go watch it. It was at the very end of the game. But really good play by Tyke Smith, and then good job by Dan Jackson to get over there as well. They both had picks, but I'm just glad we escaped with a win. And I think by the end of the year, we're going to look back, and that's going to be the turning point for this team. Because we were tested.
Well, the defense certainly came to play, but the offense still looking a little shaky. They for sure need to keep getting better.
You're right.
But we previewed 5 games last week. Obviously, we've already started off with our teams. There were 3 other games that we previewed, all 2 SEC games and then 1 containing an SEC game. My game of the week was LSU Mississippi State. Obviously, didn't turn out great. Your game of the week was Tennessee Florida. Obviously didn't turn out that great either. The other game that we highlighted that I thought had great potential ended up being the game of the week, and that was Kansas State traveling over to Columbia, Missouri to take on the Missouri Tigers. And, man, it didn't disappoint. I think I came away from this game even more mad, though, at Mevis, the kicker from Missouri. I mean, how do you miss a 19-yard field goal against Auburn last year, but absolutely drill a 61-yarder?
He hit against us whenever they pushed us to the ledge. I think he was 5 for 5 with 2 50-plus yard field goals.
I'm telling you, there is something
he had it in him.
There's something about Jordan-Hare Stadium that's got some kind of voodoo magic down there that just everything to the away team is going to go wrong. But I mean, what a game from Brady Cook. I mean, you've talked about him all year as your
I tried to tell you.
23 of 35, 356 yards and 2 touchdowns. I never doubted you. I definitely think he's a great quarterback. But he took it to the next level this past week. Even had a rushing touchdown. Didn't really run that much, but had it when it counted. And the crazy thing is Missouri didn't really have a running game, and neither did Kansas State. When you take a look at it, I mean, both of their leading rushers were in the 50s in terms of yardage. But Luther Burden went off 7 catches, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. And what did I say last week was the key for this Missouri team? Last year in this matchup, they got beat 42-13, and Luther Burden had 2 catches for like 15 yards. This year, he goes off for 7, 114, 2 touchdowns. So if you can get Luther Burden going on offense, Missouri's going to be just fine against the teams that they are close to, equivalent with, or supposed to beat. I really just want to see him play some really good talent in the SEC. I want to see him play at Georgia. I want to see him play at Tennessee or a Florida. Can't wait to see that happen. I wouldn't quite say they're the real deal, but, man, they sure do look good to start off the season.
Yeah, I mean, I was the only one out of the 4 of us doing the pick'ems to pick them to cover the spread. And so, I mean, I knew Missouri had it in them. I know I had Kansas State. I think I had them at 15 or 16. But I just didn't know what they had. I kind of ranked them up there because everybody else did. Missouri, I told you, they have a good team, have a good defense. And like you said, Luther Burden, number 1 wide receiver from 2 years ago, I believe. Yeah. Supposed to come to Georgia and then just ended up staying home with the Tigers. But, I mean, this is really good for the SEC East because, I mean, with combination of this and Florida winning, there might be some valuable teams in there. And, the SEC East might be better than the West again this year because, I mean, outside of LSU and Bama, who maybe Ole Miss as well, definitely the top of the SEC West is better. But, I mean, from excluding Vandy from top to bottom, I mean, I might have the East. So, I mean, I like I'd been telling you, Brady Cook, he's good. And if he was on any other team, he'd probably be a top 5 SEC quarterback. And again, just want to hammer it home. Luther Burden, 7 catches, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. Going to be scared when they come into Sanford Stadium because he'll probably light us up. But yeah, great showing from the.
Great matchup, Lassiter and Burden. That'll be a great matchup there in Sanford.
The only thing about it is we don't we don't match up our number one corner on their number one wide receiver. We do left and right corner. So that's why, like in our game, you saw multiple wide receivers go off. Whether it was Leggett, Omega Blake, Juju Wells had a couple catches, but they just line up on whichever side. So when he's on Kamari, he might be shut down. When he's on the other side, he might be getting 50 yards a catch.
Well, it was certainly good to see an SEC team beat a non-conference team because the SEC has been pretty horrible in that department at the start of the year.
They've been terrible.
Definitely not looking to be a great conference this year. The strength of the conference has definitely gone down. And to your point about the West and the East, I honestly think they're kind of close in terms of top to bottom. I don't even know really which one is better this year so far. I mean, I'd probably say the West has more talent than the East does. But, I mean, I feel like we always start off by saying the West is better than the East. And sometimes the East ends up, coming around. So
the last 2 years, the East has been better than the West.
And we'll see when teams play cross divisions, we'll see what happens there.
I think last year East went 13-5 against the West. So we'll see what happens this year. I'm interested, but I'm always just going to pull for SEC.
Yeah. Well, another game, an SEC East game that you said was game of the week, turned out to be a really good one.
Great game.
Interesting. I think, did you have Florida covering in this game?
Yeah. Remember I flipped the disc for the winner.
That's right. Well, I had lock of the week. My lock of the week was Tennessee covering, and boy, was I wrong. Now I want to start off by prefacing. Well, hold on. I want to start off by prefacing. Joe Milton is not the quarterback I thought he was going to be, at least to start the season. Obviously, we all know his talent and he has incredible upside, but he has not played at a Heisman caliber, to say the least. Now, to second that point, Joe Milton was not as bad as people were saying he was on Saturday night. I thought he played well considering the circumstances and considering what his offensive line and how his running backs played in that game. 16 carries, 63 yards for Wright. That's their leading rusher. Milton had no help. Now he did throw a really bad interception from what I understand. I didn't see the interception, but I also saw both of his touchdown passes, and one of them was a spectacular one where he went out to the left and threw it like 60 yards in the air. It was a perfect throw. And Brew McCoy looked really good. I was surprised to see him look as good as he did. And another thing about Tennessee's defense, they really kind of took Ricky Pearsall out of the game. He was their leading receiver, but he only had like 44 yards. But the way Graham Mertz managed that game, I think he's a true game manager quarterback. 19 to 24, 166 yards and a touchdown. Didn't make any mistakes. Very conservative with the ball, but put it where it needed to be. And they really highlighted the running game, something I talked about at the beginning of the year with Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson Jr. Both of those guys went off. Really good to see for Florida fans, I know, especially your family. I'm sure they were loving life on Saturday night. But, Florida just absolutely the physicality was on their side on Saturday night. They just beat a team that no one really thought was going to happen in their own place, and they kept that streak going.
Yeah, that's what I was going to tell you. Both you and I, we both owe Nick an apology. We both picked against the Gators. So Nick,
sorry, Nick.
That's my older brother. I apologize. That's on me. I will still be doubting the Gators. This didn't turn anything for me. I hate both teams. I was pulling for them to both lose. And, Tennessee looked awful. Florida didn't look that bad. I mean, I still think their passing game is really stale. If Graham Mertz is exactly what you said. He's a game manager. 19 for 24, 166 yards with a touchdown. I don't know what his longest throw was, but I doubt he had one down the field. Eugene Wilson, though, he was their leading receiver with 44 yards. Looked really good. He's a freshman. And then obviously Trevor Etienne, 23 carries for 172 yards for the touchdown. But I mean, I've been saying it, I'm not always right. Of course I'm not. But I will say I was right about Joe Milton. I don't think he's awful. I don't think I've ever said that he's bad. Maybe if I was over exaggerating, but I just knew he was overrated. He's not a Heisman winning quarterback. And so to say that he's looked far from that it's true. He hasn't even looked like a top SEC quarterback this year. And I will say this, I think this was his best game. 20 for 34, 287, 2 touchdowns, really bad interception. But like you said, he made really good throws. There was a touchdown to Brew McCoy, I think, on the sideline. that was a dot. And then he had a couple other good throws.
Absolute dot.
But my thing is, he's going to have good throws every game. Like he has a cannon. If it's a deep throw, he can make it a lot of the time. My thing is his down to down. He is very inaccurate. He has very poor decision making. He doesn't progress through his reads. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that he has good throws. He has good throws every game. But, I mean, when you play like this, you don't put your team in a position to win. And that's exactly what happened whenever – I mean, you basically become one-dimensional with your team only having 100 rushing yards. I mean, that was Florida's plan all along. They have to be able to rush the ball. And if they can't do that, Joe Milton has to go win it for them. And I think he proved on Saturday that he can't do that.
Well, I think you can categorize Joe Milton kind of with Jalen Milroe. I think both of them are the talent's there. You can see it. They both have the arm talent. They both have obviously for Milroe, he's more athletic. He's a better runner, but Milton can do that if he really needed to.
Yeah.
And then obviously Milton's has more arm talent than Milroe does, but both of them struggle in the decision making and the intermediate throws. Both of them have had a tough year doing that. And you really kind of group them both together. But then when you say the whole he's not a top quarterback in the SEC, well, I want to hear who the top quarterback in the SEC is this year. I mean, is it Brady Cook?
Yeah.
Is it
Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels, is it? I mean, he didn't have a great game against FSU. I mean, Will Rogers maybe before this past week, but he was abysmal. I mean, there really hasn't been great quarterback play in the SEC. There hasn't been consistent quarterback play, if you want to put it like that. But I also kind of categorize Florida in the same as South Carolina. I mean, obviously both teams looked like terrible first week, but both teams have progressed a lot in the last 2 weeks. And I'd say both teams are still wild cards. I really don't know how to view either team. Obviously, Florida ended up with a win this weekend. South Carolina's 1-2, so different records. But if they played on the same field today, I really don't know who'd win, honestly. So they're two teams kind of in similar ballparks and stratospheres, if you'd say. But I think if you can take the running game out of Florida, you're not gonna have a problem stopping them, because that running game has to be going for them to win, and it was on Saturday night, and it wasn't against Utah. So I think that's kind of their bread and butter this year is going to be running.
Yeah. I'll say two quick things. You mentioned it, Joe Milton, Jalen Milroe. You can kind of group them together. I've compared both of them to Anthony Richardson. Obviously Anthony Richardson's more of an athlete than Joe Milton. Joe Milton has a better arm, but I mean, both of them have a lot of potential, are really good on deep throws, but all three of them struggled in college with decision-making, progressing through reads. And it's not to say that neither one of them can figure it out, because, I mean, before AR left the game on Sunday, he was looking really good. So, I mean, they can figure it out, but, I mean, exactly like you said, both of them struggle progressing through the reads and their decision-making. So, I mean, with that, do you want to talk about LSU, Mississippi State?
Quick notes, yeah. Obviously, you could tell Mississippi State wanted to change how they've done, how they've been playing. They've been a lot more run centric to start the year, the first two games. And what did we talk about last week, Jake? I said they needed to throw the ball in order to win this game. Well, they tried, and it didn't work.
They tried.
41-14, your final score, LSU over Mississippi State. LSU, another team I'd say that has looked infinitely better since week one. Obviously, they played a very quality FSU team, a team that I've got in my top 10. Surely you do as well. But Jaden Daniels, I mean, for the Jaden Daniels haters out there, this week he kind of shuts you up. I mean, he went 30 of 34, 361 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also carried the ball 15 times for 64 yards and 2 touchdowns. Another team that I worry about, I feel like they're too pass-centric, and I'm talking about LSU. I mean, if Jaden Daniels is your leading rusher and you don't really have anyone behind him to run the ball, I'm worried that if they can't throw the ball at some point this year, they're just going to get toasted, because I mean, they've got really no run game. And Malik Neighbors, I mean, 13 catches, 239, 2 touchdowns. He is a dog. He's the best receiver to me in the SEC. I think he's a first-round talent. It's going to be a first-round draft pick this upcoming year. But then on the flip side, for Mississippi State's offense, there are no playmakers on that offense whatsoever. I mean, the only touchdown pass that they had was from backup Mike Wright, the transfer from Vanderbilt. So Rodgers didn't even get a touchdown pass, and we had that on best bets last week. We'll talk about that on the bet section, not the best bets. But yeah, Mississippi State, I said at the beginning of the year, they're probably going to go 6-6. They started off 2-0, and they look like a very bad football team. So not really surprised by the way they played. I will say I expected a lot more from them just on their start. And, their mantra usually is a really good defensive team that could throw the football. And they were the complete opposite this weekend. So,
I mean, like you said, I wasn't really surprised how the game went. I had LSU covering. I think I said that they were going to win by probably about 20. I didn't see this bad coming. But Will Rogers, 7 QBR. That's the part I was wrong about. I don't know if I had him as my number one quarterback in the SEC, but I without a doubt had him as top 3. And like you said, he doesn't have any weapons around him. Second leading receiver this game, Justin Robinson. He was a guy that transferred from Georgia because he was not ever going to break the wide receiver group. But I mean, I said it in the beginning of the year. I don't know why people had them ranked in the top 25, Mississippi State. They were kind of getting the same feeling as A&M, where they sucked last year, didn't really have anything going for them, and then people just wanted to overrate them and put them in the top 25. They never showed anything for me. But I mean, LSU looked extremely good. They either them or Ohio State looked like the best team this past weekend. So, and like you said, they played a really formidable opponent in FSU the first week. I have them in my top 5, I believe, even though they looked horrifically on Saturday. They're still a really good team. So, I mean, and I think it's worth talking about. I don't know if there's an elite team in college football this year. I don't think there is. So
I don't think there is
that's what
either.
I'm saying. It is. I mean, maybe Washington.
I think Texas could be elite. Texas,
Yeah, but
Texas. If I had to name an elite team, Texas.
I mean, there's so many teams that could be elite, but I mean, Texas looked horrible against Wyoming this weekend. They were they were tied 10-10 going into the 4th. And Quinn Ewers did not play well at all. I mean, so just like I said, there's so many teams that could be in it. Really interested to see how this shakes out.
Well, there's just been a ton of inconsistency, I think, in college football. And obviously we're not used to that. We're used to having a few teams at the top that are consistent week in and week out. But I think it just goes to show you with all the new rules in college football, there's a lot more parity in the game now. And I also just want to mention this before. Mel Tucker has been fired due to cause. So we talked about that a couple weeks ago. But we won't stick on that. Let's visit our week 3 bets.
Yep.
We'll start off with the good, which includes 2 bets of mine out of 6 that I put forth. I will be hammering the Rutgers all the rest of the year. They ended up beating Virginia Tech, I think, by like 16 or 17, and the line was like 7. So yeah, Rutgers covered there. Really liked what I've seen from the Scarlet Knights so far in the fight in Greg Schiano's. But then the number that we both thought was absolutely insane, the 339.5 for Shedeur Sanders hit by 9 yards. He ended up at 348. So it wasn't too crazy. And I thought it was the craziest pick I had of the 6, and the rest of them did not hit. So
I will say, I mean, my lock of the week missed Drew Allard 238.5. He did not play well on Saturday, so I don't even think he broke 200. I did go 2 for 3 in player props, though. There is that. Jalen Wright and Trevor Etienne over 118.5, and also Squirrel White over 55.5. Both those hit. So at least there's something. But I went 0 for 3 on games picked. Georgia Southern lost by, I think, 25.
And I don't know if you got to watch that game, but they were playing very well and hanging in there. And towards the end,
it was close. Both those 2 games, that one and Georgia Tech Ole Miss, they were really close to hitting. WKU Ohio State, not even close. I think they lost by 53.
Well, but Georgia Southern, what's crazy is they ended up losing by 3 touchdowns, and they had the turnover differential was like they had 7 turnovers to Wisconsin's 0, and they only lost by 3 touchdowns. So that's kind of bad on Wisconsin. Yeah, Georgia Southern was able to stick around in that game.
That's kind of a bad beat then. And I mean, the worst beat was Georgia Tech at Ole Miss. Georgia Tech lost by 21. I'm pretty sure Ole Miss scored a really late touchdown. I don't know when, but Lane Kiffin had them covering the spread, so he wanted to get in the end zone.
Yeah. And another thing, Alabama, I mean, we forced 6 turnovers this weekend, and we had 0 on offense, and we only won by 14. So that shows you how bad that was as well. But some of the bad for me, I went obviously 1 of 3 on games and 1 of 3 on players. I had Graham Mertz 210.5 passing yards over. He only threw for 166. I had Will Rogers at least 2 touchdowns or more, and he didn't throw for 1. My lock of the week was Tennessee to cover. They obviously lost by 13, and also had Arkansas covering the 8 points against BYU, and they lost by 7. So
Bad showing all the way around.
yeah, not a great week at all.
I
But
went 4 for 12 and you went 5 for 12.
yeah, not looking good so far. So we're gonna just rename that the bet section, and we'll move on from that. But let's go ahead and do our. You want to do the top 25 next, or you want to do helmet stickers?
Let's do some helmet stickers. I want to show some love to a fellow Georgia Bulldog, Kamari Laster. Dude,
hey, you got a prop there and everything. Hold it up. Hold your prop up.
You see it. You see it.
Back that sticker on there.
Kamari Laster played really, really, really well on Saturday. From what I saw, I mean, I don't have the exact stats like how many yards he allowed, QBR. Anyway, what I saw is he only allowed like one pass for like 10 yards, maybe here and there, a couple others. I mean, you look at the stats, you never, unless a corner has an interception, you can never really read too much into it. 2 pass deflections, 2.5 tackles for loss. I mean, dude was covering some of the best wide receivers in the SEC, not allowing a yard, and then also was playing really well on the screens. That's where 2.5 tackles for loss came. So I honestly think without him, we could have lost, because they definitely would have scored at least one more touchdown if we didn't have him over at corner. You know, he was on an island the whole entire game and played extremely well and was reacting to some of those quick screens extremely fast as well. So I was just very impressed with him, especially because, I mean, we never played a vertical threat the first 2 games, but he didn't play exactly amazing the first 2 games. I think he had a pass interference both times. So I'm just really pleased with how he did, and hopefully Dalen Everett can start locking things up on the other side as well.
Yeah, well, I'm going to stay in the SEC. I'm actually going to have the SEC 3 SEC players for my 3 helmet stickers this week. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to do one of the guys that I talked about preseason, one of the most underrated players in college football, and that's Trevor Etienne, the running back at Florida, who ended his day with 23 carries for 172 yards and a touchdown. He was instrumental in Florida's home upset over the Tennessee Volunteers. Kept that streak alive there in Gainesville. They're I mean, it's a tough place to play. We all know that, but it's even tougher for Tennessee, it looks like, when they go into Gainesville, into the swamp. So yeah, Trevor Etienne, hats off to him. He had a great week. So that's helmet sticker number 1 for me.
Let's show some love to the Pac-12. Michael Penix, 27 for 35, 4 touchdowns, 473 yards. That was the line that was insane. His was higher than Shedur's. It was 349.5. And obviously I stayed away from that. Probably should have hammered the over though. I mean, threw for over 100 yards more than that. And so dude just went absolutely berserk. For me, he's obviously the Heisman leader. You know, he looks really good. He's not a dual threat, but I mean, it looks like he can make every single pass on the field. And so with him back there quarterbacking, I don't know what game they lose. They could potentially make the playoff. As long as he keeps this up, I don't see any team beating them.
Yeah, they've looked really nice so far. Now, what I can't wait to watch them take on USC. I mean, what a shootout that's going to be. But, you know, I still think it's, in terms of just Washington's playoff chances, I think it's tough when you don't have a defense. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. But my number 2 helmet sticker of the week is going to go to LSU receiver Malik Neighbors. We were talking about him earlier. 13 catches for 239 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, the dude went absolutely off. I mean, I felt like every time that the ball was being thrown to him, it was a vertical to the end zone where he had just beat the opposing corner. Obviously, it's Mississippi State, but, I mean, we got to pay this dude respect. He's the best receiver in the SEC, probably a top 3 receiver in college football behind the 2 Ohio State guys. Really like what I've seen so far from him. I mean, you can even throw Keon Coleman in that top, like, 4 or 5 receivers in college football, but Malik Neighbors, a force to be reckoned with there in Baton Rouge.
Yeah. My final sticker, Dallin Holker. Never heard of him. Couldn't tell you. I mean, he's number 5, but couldn't tell you anything about him. But I was watching that Colorado State game a little bit, and it just looked like he was having his way with the Colorado defense. He had 6.
Is he a white guy on the Colorado? Colorado? Dude, he was good.
Number 5, the tight end, 6 receptions, 109 yards with 2 touchdowns. Honestly, I thought it was going to be more than that. He had a crazy touchdown. It was like a shoestring catch, and then he took it for 45 yards and broke like 2 tackles. Anyway, I know it's Colorado's defense, but he did look really good, and I just wanted to show some love to Colorado State, because they should have pulled pulled the upset. They sold that game so
Really
hard.
did. Yeah, they did. And shout out to the big man over there. But my last helmet sticker is going to go to Brady Cook, Missouri's quarterback. Huge win for that program when they really needed it. Hats off to him. 23 of 35 for 356 yards, 2 touchdowns, and even including a rushing touchdown. So he accounted for 21 of the team's 30 points. I mean, what a day he had. You can throw Luther Burden in there. You can even throw Missouri's kicker Mevis in there. I mean, just a great all-around game from the Missouri Tigers. Hopefully they can continue this streak going into SEC play and make that SEC East a lot more interesting than it was already going to be. But yeah, that's helmet stickers for week 3. We both gave out 3. We'll continue to do that. Come back, bring it back next week for week 4. Maybe we'll see an Alabama player on there. Maybe Jalen Milroe makes an appearance. Or maybe Jackson Dart makes an appearance on
I
there.
was about to say, you never know.
So, well, let's finish this show with our new top 25. Jake, why don't you start us off? 25 through 21. Go.
Yep, I got 3 new entrants right here. Number 25, I got Florida. Number 24, I got Missouri, both in the SEC East. Number 23, Miami. I know I hated on them right after they beat A&M, but I don't look around the nation and see top 25 teams. I just don't know who else is up here. 22 UCLA and then 21 Tulane. I had a lot of risers this week. A lot of them just rose 1 or 2 spots. But I mean, like I said, I really struggled with, pretty much 15 through 25 just because I don't know because it's inconsistency throughout the top 25. Of course, the elite teams haven't always looked elite, but which ones those are. But the 15 through 25, there's probably like 30 teams that you could put in there.
Now, it's been very tough to fill this out. And honestly, I've kind of just stuck with what I've done the week before. I only have 1 new entry this week. The team that fell out of the top 25 was Kansas State, and the team that replaced them was the team that beat them, Missouri. So I've got Missouri at 25. I've got Duke at 24, Iowa at 23. Big game coming up for the Hawkeyes next week. They're taking on Penn State at Penn State. It's a 14.5-point spread for Penn State. I think that game is going to be a lot closer than people realize. Watch out for the Iowa Hawkeyes. They can be dangerous. They scored over 30 points this past week. First time they've done that in a long time.
Oh, wow. Look at the Hawkeyes.
And they've got a quarterback they like and they trust for the first time in a long time. So watch out for the Hawkeyes, especially if Drew Aller's struggling. Who knows? Iowa could pull off the upset in Happy Valley. 22, I've got UCF. At 21, I've got Colorado. I moved them up. I don't really know why, but obviously the Travis Hunter injury is a big deal. They're going to play at Oregon next week. I mean, I feel like we've previewed every Colorado game and are going to again this upcoming week. So it's a 21-point spread against Oregon. That is a humongous line. I can't imagine Oregon covers that, but at the same time, you never know this Colorado team. I thought they would win handily this weekend against Colorado State, but Colorado State gave them a fight. So that's my 25 through 21. So.
Yeah, Colorado's looked extremely inconsistent. That's why I dropped them to 20. Colorado State's a really bad team, and they barely pulled away. And like I said, Colorado State sold that game. They should have won. And so, I mean, props to them for escaping with a win. I do think Oregon. I mean, this might be one of my best bets. I think they cover. I think Oregon absolutely obliterates Colorado.
Really?
Maybe even wins by 40 plus. So I have Colorado at 20, UCF 19, Duke 18, Utah at 17, North Carolina 16. Pretty much all those teams just moved up 1 spot outside of Colorado, dropping 5.
Yeah, I've got Miami at 20. Tennessee dropped from number 10 to number 19. They not what they wanted to see from them this weekend, especially on the road in Florida. Team I still think they're better than and would beat on a neutral site. 18, I've got Oregon State. 17, I've got Washington State. That is a huge matchup this upcoming week. Oregon State at Washington State. Oregon State's a 2.5-point favorite over Wazoo. And we know how much I love Wazoo this year. They beat Wisconsin already. I think they're going to beat the Beavers at home this weekend. They're my super team in the Pac-12. I'm really looking forward to that. That's a game that I'm really going to have to highlight and watch, and maybe even record so I can watch it later. Because I even think Washington State has the better quarterback in this game with Cam Ward over DJU. At 16, I've got Utah. Utah is a team that still has not played with Cam Rising this year, yet they've continued to play pretty well. I know that they struggled a little bit the last couple of weeks, but I think when Cam Rising comes back, that team's a completely different team. He kind of has a Sam Hartman effect, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I would compare those two. Those two players are very similar, in my opinion. I think Sam's a little bit better, but I think you great things ahead of Utah. I mean, they've won the Pac-12 2 years in a row, and they're sitting at number 16. So I've got the Utes there.
Yeah, you mentioned it, Wazoo, Oregon State this week. If they pull off the upset, I'm definitely going to have to put Wazoo probably top 20. I've kind of just been neglecting them, but for my top 15, I got Oklahoma, they've looked really good this year. 14 Ole Miss, 13 Oregon State, Bama 12, Oregon 11. Again, there's just so much inconsistencies within college football this year, and it's been great. I love chaos, but it just makes it extremely hard to rank these
As long as
teams.
it doesn't happen to your team, right? Chaos is what chaos as long as it avoids the Bulldogs, huh?
I mean, Saturday was almost chaotic, but yeah, I couldn't tell you if Oregon State would beat Bama on a neutral site field. The way Bama played on Saturday, obviously all 25 teams are beating Bama, but it's at the end of the day, it's still Bama. So I got no clue.
Yeah. At 15, we got the same one. I've got Oklahoma at 15. At 14, I've got North Carolina. At 13, I've got LSU. At 12, I've got Ole Miss. And 11, I've got Alabama. Obviously, I mean, I thought of dropping Alabama out of my top 25. That's how pissed off I was this past week at how they played. And like you said, every team in the top 25 and more probably could have beat that Alabama team that showed up in Tampa this past week. It's going to be a great game this upcoming weekend. Ole Miss visiting Alabama. There's a lot of great games this upcoming weekend. We've got a ton to talk about in our next show. There's plenty of spots College Game Day could have picked, and I wouldn't have thought there would have been one wrong one. But LSU definitely looks a lot better. So that's 15 through 11 for me.
Yeah, that surprises me. You put LSU last of the three West teams because I have them at first for those. I have LSU at 10, Ohio State at 9, Notre Dame at 8, USC at 7, and then Washington at 6. They got bumped up because of that 41-0 win. They looked really good. Ohio State also looked really good. Notre Dame looked good. LSU looked really good. I mean, some of these teams in the bottom half of the top 10 looked really good, but the top half looked terrible. All 5 teams were really. So again, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know either at this point. 10, I've got Washington. Very impressed with them so far this year, especially without their starting running back. 9, I kept USC there. 8, Oregon. 7, Florida State. What a horrible performance from Florida State this week. Boston College is a bad team.
Barely escaped with a win.
They barely escaped. I mean, it was pretty tough to watch. 6, I've got Notre Dame. And a little preview in the next show. Notre Dame going into Buckeye Stadium in Columbus, Ohio.
Going to be
Give me the Fighting Irish to beat the Ohio State Buckeyes this upcoming weekend. I'm a Sam Hartman believer. I'm on the train. Give me the Notre Dame Fighting Irish to upset the Buckeyes in Columbus. A little preview and going into next week. But that's, again, Washington, USC, Oregon, Florida State, Notre Dame. That's 10 through 6. So
my top 5. I got Texas at 5. Looked really bad against Wyoming, but this is going to be consistent for the rest of the top 5. Wyoming, they did beat Texas Tech, but they're not a good team. So Texas just looked really bad, 10-10 going into the 4th. I dropped FSU to 4. I mean, like I said, inconsistencies from everyone. I'm not reading too much into that, but I did drop them 2 spots because they looked horrific. Penn State at 3, they didn't look good against Illinois. I think they won.
It's a quality team, though. Illinois is a quality team. Good defense.
See, and that's the difference between Texas and FSU's wins and Bama's wins, because all 3 of those teams weren't quality teams. At least Georgia and Penn State played quality teams. I mean, South Carolina is probably the best of all of them, but Georgia didn't look good. So then I have Michigan at 2, who didn't play great against Bowling Green, and also they've played no one to this point.
Yeah.
And then Georgia's still at 1. I debated on dropping Georgia. If Michigan would have played well, if Penn State would have played well, if FSU would have played well, if Texas would have played well, I probably would have put any of them at 1. But since none of them really played that great, Georgia's still at 1 for me.
I'll be honest, from like 1 to 13 for me on my list, there is not much separation. There is not much separation. Like from 1 to 13.
Mine's like 1 to 15.
So I think it kind of stops at LSU for me. I wouldn't say North Carolina or Oklahoma really are in that upper
See,
echelon.
I think Oklahoma is. I think Oklahoma can win a natty.
I don't think Oklahoma has a defense, but my 5-1, I've got Penn State at number 5. Obviously, I value that really good Illinois team they played on the road this week. I know they didn't look great, but they still covered the spread and played well. Ohio State 4, what a turnaround. We both had Western Kentucky covering that game, and they got obliterated. Kyle McCord looked like a completely different player. 3, and I've kept my top 3 the same: Michigan at 3, Georgia at 2, Texas at 1. I still think Texas is the most complete team in the country, especially with the offensive struggles Georgia's had. If Georgia would be a little bit more consistent on offense, I would put Georgia at 1 just because I think they have a better defense than Texas has. But it's really hard to ignore those playmakers on Texas's offense.
I mean, yeah, that's very fair. Georgia has not looked consistent on offense, but neither is Texas. Texas looked bad against Rice on offense, looked good against Bama, obviously, but then they looked horrific against Wyoming.
But they showed you in the fourth quarter what they can do, and they can really turn it on and score. Very. I mean, that's why I think they're the most dangerous team in college football.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair, but the same thing goes for Georgia. Georgia outscored them 21-0 in the second half, showed you what they could do. Who are you
taking in a shootout, Georgia or Texas?
Texas, but I don't think it'd be
that's why I would say that's why I'm putting it.
I just don't think it'd be a shootout.
I mean, I don't think it would either, but I think Texas defense is a lot better than what people give them credit for. And I think Georgia's offense would have a tough time against Texas's defense, even on an injury field.
I mean, but exactly like you said.
Offense would have a tough time against Georgia's offense. But if one had to prevail in the end, I'm picking Texas to go over Georgia.
That's fair.
Just at the moment. Well, obviously, all of these for both of us is subject to change. So,
and that's completely fair. Like you said, my 1 through 15, not much separation. Georgia, I do think they'd beat Ole Miss right now, but probably by like 7 or 10. And I have 14 teams in between them.
I mean, I think Washington would beat Alabama right now. I think USC, I think Oregon, Florida State, all those teams would beat Alabama right now. But none of these, we got to keep in mind, none of these teams are what they look like currently is not what they're going to look like towards the end of the year. It could be for a positive or a negative. Alabama could end up looking a lot better. They could end up going 8-4 and they could look bad. Ohio State, I mean, they've been very inconsistent to start this year off. It looks like they're headed in the right direction, but I mean, who's to say that they don't, hit a stop sign and go back? I mean, you never know. And all it really takes could be one injury. I mean, what happens if Michigan's quarterback McCarthy goes down? What happens in their season? What happens if Drew Aller goes down? Penn State and Michigan would be done if both of those guys went down. Same could be said of Notre Dame, Florida State, if Oregon, USC, if all of those guys go down, I mean, their season looks completely different. Yeah. I think really the only programs that could sustain a quarterback injury right now and kind of keep it at the same, I think Texas could sustain a quarterback injury. I think Georgia could sustain a quarterback injury.
LSU
could sustain a quarterback injury. Ole Miss could.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, Oklahoma could. I think USC could, honestly. I mean, they've got a really good talent behind Caleb Williams with Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson. But like North Carolina, done. Washington State, done. Oregon State, done. Tennessee, I don't know. Nikolai Malevas, I don't know. Miami, done. Colorado, done. UCF, done. Iowa, definitely done. Duke, done. So it's like all these teams in the top 12 is one injury away from being out of the top 12 or out of the top 25. So
it's going to be interesting how the rest of the
sport we live in. It's a crazy sport we watch. So, but
I'd say that was a success, the show.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is honestly the craziest year I've witnessed of college football since 2007. I mean, 2007 was just an unreal season of college football, but how unpredictable has this year been so far? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you told me Bama was 2-1 at this point, but the way they played this past week, and I mean, I thought Georgia's offense wouldn't look that shaky to start this year, and they have. And I mean, it's been
only 3 weeks in.
But hey, that makes college football so much more fun, right? And that makes it the best sport on planet Earth.
I was about to say that's why this is the best sport to follow.
Yeah. So again, guys, thank you for joining us. Another great week. The show will probably come out, Monday night or Tuesday morning. Episode 11 is coming later this week. We'll preview week 4. Week 4. We're almost there, and probably going to be the most exciting weekend of college football to date, so far this season at least. We'll have some more bets for you. We'll preview some more games. Got a lot of fun stuff lined up for you guys. But again, thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe, like, follow. Let people know about it. So I think we're doing a pretty good job here so far. So, but we enjoy your support. Thanks again, and roll Tide.
Go Dogs, baby.